and it's coming from a number of directions. So on the COVID front, they don't have a vaccine that works. Full lockdowns are the only tool that they have. So they've already locked down Shanghai and Ningbo. They're in the process of evaluating whether they need to shut down Guangzhou, but it looks like almost certainly at this point. So that takes the two largest industrial and manufacturing centers in China, responsible for roughly half of the total. It just takes them offline for an indeterminate period of time. The Shanghai lockdown has now been in place for 2 weeks already, and there are no signs from the government that there's going to be any meaningful loosening of that. So the ports are down, the manufacturing is down, the people are locked up. The only facilities that are still running are those who have decided to keep their workers captive. And since Omicron is more communicable than measles, this is the start of this, not the end of this. This is the new normal for Chinese manufacturing. This is as good as it's going to be. On the energy side, the great loser from the Ukraine war, after Ukraine obviously, is China. Because the energy that goes direct from eastern Siberian fields to China can only be produced by foreign firms. The Russians can't operate those projects. They're all getting shut down. So that's going down. And then anything that might come the long way around has to go through that shuttle tanker repackaging, sailed by a bunch of NATO countries, and ultimately make it. And that's just not a very feasible plan, especially when people are talking about energy security. And that's before the Europeans start redirecting anything or the Indians start getting politically active in the Persian Gulf, all of which is going to happen this year. We're looking at a sustained energy, not shock, shortage in the Chinese market that is going to last at least several years. And then at the top, Chairman Xi has intimidated or executed or exiled everyone who is capable of independent thought in the country into silence or destruction. And so China cannot adjust its policy because there's no longer a cadre of smart people to make the policy in the first place. People are carrying out what Xi says to the best of their ability because he's their emperor, and that's that. And so we're seeing these amazing policy disconnects in health, in agriculture, in electricity that shouldn't happen in a country that has a leader with an IQ of at least 95. And it's destroying the Chinese capacity to be the China that we know. I don't think China is going to be a nation state by the end of the decade. I think we're looking at dissolution here. If you look at the 5,000 years of Chinese history, this is the norm. There's a lot of other things going on with the Chinese space regards to the Ukraine war, because at first the Chinese saw the war starting like, excellent. We're going to get a litmus test for our strategy for Taiwan. It's going to be easy, and we're going to show the world that we can just go and grab it, and they just have to suck it up. It has not gone to plan. So number one, the Russians are having some severe problems in dealing with the Ukrainians. And the Russians know where all the infrastructure is in Ukraine. There is a huge population mismatch. There's a huge military mismatch. But most of all, there's no barrier between the Russians and the Ukrainians. And they're still having problems. Taiwan has been preparing for the China war now for 70 years. And there's a body of water in between. So all of a sudden, these rosy military goals and estimations that the Chinese had have gone out the window. Second, the sanctions. Say what you will about the Russian economy. It's not great, but they are a massive exporter of food and energy. If the sanctions that were on Russia now were put against China, China would decivilize in less than a year because it's the world's largest importer of food inputs, and energy. There's no way you can maintain that system without full access to everything. And probably the one that even worries the Chinese more now are the boycotts. The idea that people, individuals, have any say in how an industrial process might happen or on like war policy, that's just antithetical. But it's happened, and it's been more effective against Russia than the sanctions have been. Well, that's the entire Chinese economic model. So the Chinese now know that what they've been preparing for 50 years, they've been preparing for the wrong thing. And since Xi has gutted the intelligentsia, they no longer have the personnel to come up with another plan. So they're just slamming their heads into the wall over and over and over until their skull cracks. And that's what we're seeing in places like Shanghai right now. Well, the book starts from the point of view that China's already gone.
Oh, it does.
The end of the world is just the beginning is the title, and it's all about what the various economic sectors look on the backside of globalization. So, manufacturing in a post-China age, energy in a post-Middle East age. How does everything reshape in a world where those connections are no longer there? Well, we go through the 6 major economic sectors: transport, finance, industrial commodities, manufacturing, agriculture, and of course, energy. And we show how we got to where we are in today's globalized era, and then how we're going to devolve in the decades to come. I was hoping that the book would be out a little bit earlier, but there was a paper shortage, which ironically is covered in the book. Uh,
Supply
but
chain
here we
issue.
are. But we're looking at June. Every single province in Canada is more economically integrated with the United States than it is with their fellow provinces in Canada. So there's always going to be this economic pull to do things a little bit differently in Canada versus any other country in the world. Canada really is unique in that way. For Alberta specifically, the energy exports and the export taxes and production taxes on those exports, that is the single most important factor in what allows Canada to function in its current environment. If something happened to the oil income, the Canadian state would have a hard time providing for its citizens with its current budgetary outlays. Uh, when I wrote the first book 8 years ago, I called it the Alberta question, and that the Albertans were going to very seriously discuss secession because that was the cleanest way to fix it. I didn't mean to say that it was an easy decision, but when it comes to finance and tax and inflation and labor, it would have fixed all of the problems. What's happened in the last 8 years since is, to be perfectly blunt, the Albertans have been pretty Canadian about it, pretty polite about it. And so there have been discussions and there have been complaints and there have been arguments and charges, but it has never risen to the point that a full independence referendum was ever, in my opinion, seriously considered. And as Albertan energy as a component of North American energy has relatively shrunk as shale has become more and more important in the United States, the interest on the American side for even paying attention to that discussion has dropped off. We may be entering a new period, though. With the loss of Russian crude and the upending of global energy, the crude blend mismatch between Canada, or between Alberta and the United States is so different, and it would be so beneficial for American refineries that all of a sudden it's coming back on the agenda really quick. So we're going to find out in the next 3 or 4 years just how much Alberta really is upset with its situation. Because in the next 3 to 4 years, the vast majority of the Canadian baby boomer cadre will have moved into mass retirement, and the state outlays that Ottawa has to do are going to be huge compared to what they have been, but the income hasn't changed. And so the income has to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is Alberta. The tax pressure you guys are used to is nothing compared to what's coming. I'm dealing with the world breaking into pieces, so unless somebody has written some prognostications on that, I don't have time for it right now.